A few jokes on a podcast just opened up one of hip-hop's oldest wounds. Cameron and Mase were doing their usual thing on their show, going back and forth, cracking jokes, telling old stories. Then they started talking about the night Biggie died. They laughed about the security not firing back. They questioned who showed up and who didn't. And somewhere in Los Angeles, Gene Deal heard every word. For those who don't know, Gene Deal was Puff Daddy's personal bodyguard during the Bad Boy era. He was there the night Biggie was killed in March of 1997. He spent years talking about what he saw, what he knows, and what he believes really happened. So when he caught wind of Cam and Mase joking about that night, he didn't find it funny at all. Gene went online and started responding directly. His tone wasn't playful. There was no back and forth banter. He looked into the camera and said that after Biggie got shot, nobody from Bad Boy fired back. He talked about how everyone just wanted to go home. He specifically called out the fact that Mase didn't show up to the party that night, suggesting that Mase knew something was wrong before it even happened. Here's where it gets heavy. Gene claimed that when Mase was in California before the shooting, people approached him at a basketball game and told him directly that they wanted Puff and they wanted Big. According to Gene, Mase heard that warning and decided to stay back at the hotel instead of going out that night. Gene's point was clear. If Mase knew enough to stay away, what does that say about everything else? The original podcast moment happened during a conversation between Cameron and Mase on their show, It Is What It Is. They were discussing the events surrounding Biggie's murder, and Cam started asking questions that a lot of people have wondered about for years. Why didn't security react? If there were weapons present, why didn't anyone fire back when the shots rang out? Cam pushed the conversation further and further, and Mase tried to explain his side, but the whole thing started feeling less like entertainment and more like an interrogation. Gene Deal wasn't having any of it. He pointed out that immediately after Biggie was shot, Puff got on a private jet and left California. The rest of the crew scattered. Gene said he was the one left trying to figure out how to get home while everyone else had already disappeared. He specifically mentioned that Mase found his own way out of the city and Puff was gone before anyone could process what had happened. What made Gene's response hit different was the personal nature of it. He wasn't speaking as some outside commentator or podcast host looking for clicks. He was there. He lived through that night. And he's been carrying whatever he saw for nearly 3 decades. When Cam and Mase started laughing about it on their show, Gene took it as disrespect to the memory of what actually happened. Gene addressed the content creators who jumped on the story, trying to spin narratives and get views. He challenged anyone to say that Mase knew the whole situation. He explained that there's no way he could have been positioned sideways in the car because of where Puff would have been sitting. These are specific details that only someone who was actually there would know or care about. The tension between what Cam and Mase said on the podcast and what Gene Deal responded with comes down to perspective. Cam and Mase were looking back at 1997 from 2024, telling stories the way people do when enough time has passed. Gene Deal is still living in that moment. For him, time hasn't softened anything. The questions Cam raised so casually are the same questions Gene has been asking seriously for years. Mase's position in all of this is complicated. He's been criticized for years about his relationship with Puff and his decisions during the Bad Boy era. When he became a pastor and stepped away from rap, people questioned his motives. When he came back to music, people questioned that too. And every time the topic of Biggie's death comes up, Mase's name gets pulled into the conversation because he was so close to that inner circle. On the podcast, Mase tried to defend himself by explaining that he simply didn't go to the party that night. He stayed at the hotel. But Gene's response reframed that decision entirely. Staying at the hotel wasn't just a random choice. According to Gene, it was a calculated move based on information Mase had received about threats against Puff and Biggie. Cameron kept pushing during the podcast, and at one point the conversation shifted from Biggie's death to other moments in Mase's past. Cam started calling out situations from years ago, questioning decisions that didn't add up. The whole exchange felt unresolved, like there were years of tension between these two that had never been properly addressed. What started as jokes turned into something that clearly made both of them uncomfortable. The hip-hop community's reaction has been split. Some people think Gene Deal is speaking truth that needed to be said. Others think he's been chasing relevance for years by constantly bringing up the Biggie situation. And some people are just tired of the whole conversation, feeling like every few months someone new decides to relitigate what happened in 1997. But here's what's undeniable. Gene Deal's response carried weight because of who he is and what he witnessed. This isn't someone who read about the situation in a magazine or watched a documentary. He was standing feet away when everything went down. He knows things that have never been made public, and every time he speaks, people listen because they know he's not guessing. The broader question this situation raises is about how hip-hop deals with its traumatic history. Biggie's murder remains officially unsolved. Tupac's murder was only recently addressed with an arrest in 2023. These aren't ancient events for a lot of people. The artists who were there, the family members who lost someone, the bodyguards and managers and friends who witnessed everything, they're all still alive and still processing what happened. When Cam and Mase joke about security not firing back, they might see it as old history being discussed casually. But for Gene Deal, that's his professional reputation being questioned. He was part of that security. He was in that situation. And he's had to defend his actions and explain his positioning for almost 30 years. Gene's warning to Cam and Mase wasn't subtle. He essentially told them to stop laughing about something they don't fully understand. He called out the fact that everyone who came to L.A. with Puff that weekend managed to leave quickly after the shooting, while others were left to figure things out on their own. The implication was clear. The people at the top protected themselves first. The podcast clip that started all of this has continued circulating online, and Gene's response videos have racked up millions of views combined. Every few days, another content creator picks up the story and adds their commentary, which only keeps the cycle going. Gene addressed those creators directly, suggesting that they're more interested in views than truth. What happens next is unclear. Cam and Mase haven't issued a formal response to Gene's comments. Mase has been relatively quiet on social media since the situation escalated, and Gene Deal shows no signs of backing down. He's been doing interviews, posting videos, and making it clear that he has more to say if people want to keep pushing. This situation is a reminder that hip-hop history isn't just content for podcasts and documentaries. Real people lived through these events. Real people lost friends and family. Real people have carried secrets and trauma for decades. When that history gets turned into casual conversation for entertainment, the people who were actually there sometimes push back. Gene Deal's message to the culture was simple. Some things aren't jokes. Some nights can't be laughed off. And some people who were there remember everything, even if they've stayed quiet about most of it. The question now is whether this moment fades like so many other social media controversies, or whether it marks the beginning of a deeper conversation about what really happened during one of hip-hop's darkest chapters. Gene Deal seems ready to keep talking. The real question is whether anyone is ready to actually listen. What do you think about Gene Deal's response? Do you believe he's protecting the truth or protecting something else? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to stay updated on how this situation develops, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. This story is far from over.